Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Whoops, sorry. We would like to ask you to close all the applications that you have running just to maintain a stable audio and video connection. If your connection freezes, we would like, it's best just to exit, go to webinar, and then return to the session. The videos and slides for this presentation will be posted on CASLPO's website within 1 week of the presentation date. So, sorry, I should have corrected this, but you would visit applicants, apply to the college, and in the menu on the left, you'll see Canadian graduates. So instead of international graduates, go to Canadian graduates. So your presenters for today are myself. I'm Colleen Myrie. I'm the Director of Registration Services, and I'd like to introduce Samita.
Hi everyone, I'm Samita Jalkar and I'm the Audiology Advisor and the Manager of Mentorship.
So the presentation today, we will have 4 topics. The first will be CASLPO's Registration Regulation Amendment and the Canadian Entry to Practice exams for the professions of audiology and speech-language pathology. Good character, becoming a CASLPO registrant, which includes both the application and registration process, and also the mentorship program. Whoops, I think I lost the connection again, Samita. Oh, there we go. I think it's back.
Have you got it back?
No, it's it just went again.
Okay, just 1 second. You should have it now.
Okay, yeah, I see it. Great. Okay, so you may enter questions in the Q&A section of the GoToWebinar at any time during the presentation. And we will answer questions at the end of the registration with CASLPO section of the presentation, and again at the end of the mentorship section. We would also like you to note that there are handouts in the GoToWebinar panels that you can download and save, basically to help you with your registration, just to remember the steps. If we don't have time to answer all the questions during this presentation, we will answer questions in our FAQs after the presentation, and we will notify webinar participants when the new FAQs are available. The agenda will include a 5-minute bio break between I guess before we start the mentorship section of the presentation. Okay. So we will start with CASLPO's Registration Regulation Amendment and the Canadian Entry to Practice exams for the professions of audiology and speech-language pathology. So the college must assess applications in accordance with the requirements outlined in Ontario Regulation 2112. These requirements are laws. When a requirement is listed as a non-exemptable requirement, it means that this requirement must be applied as written. This also means that CASLPO's registrar, the college staff, and the college's registration committee do not have the authority to waive a non-exemptable requirement. So on March 12th, 2021, amendments to CASLPO's registration regulation were approved by the Ontario government. And we've provided a link to those amended registration regulations. One of the amendments of the regulation relates to the introduction of the CETP exams for audiology and speech-language pathology as a non-exemptable registration requirement. The CETP exams for audiology and speech-language pathology are competency-based exams that aim to test the recall of relevant knowledge, but more importantly, the clinical application of that knowledge and critical thinking. These exams are based on the national competency profiles and were created by professional subject matter experts working with SAC to ensure a reliable and valid exam process based on national psychometric standards. The curriculum of each Canadian education program is mapped against the national competency profiles, and the curriculum includes theory within classroom settings and the skills and application of theory during the clinical practicum. Our registration reg, which is Ontario Regulation 2112, in section 5, states that if a person had submitted an application for a certificate of registration on or after the date that Ontario Regulation 18 or 18821 came into force, but before April 1st, 2021, the requirement under paragraph 3 of subsection 1 does not apply to that person. So just to translate this, what it means is that Ontario Regulation 18821, that is the regulation with the college's amendments to the registration regulation. So on the date that the amendments came into force, which was March 12th, 2021, any applications that we had on that day or before April 1st, 2021 did not have to write the exam. However, beginning April 1st, 2021, all applicants to CASLPO must now pass the CETP exam in either audiology or speech-language pathology as a requirement for registration with CASLPO. CASLPO has included a provision in our regulation that allows the registrar to issue an initial certificate of registration prior to an applicant sitting the CETP exams for audiology or speech-language pathology, provided that the applicant commits to write their profession's exam during their 6-month mentorship period. So in order for the initial certificate to be issued, the applicant must sign an agreement to write their profession's CETP exam during the 6-month term of their initial certificate of registration. This agreement is known as an undertaking. So when completing registration as an initial registrant, an undertaking must be signed by the applicant agreeing to take their profession's CETP exam during the 6-month term of their initial certificate of registration, and also to stop practicing within 30 days if they fail the CETP exam while holding an initial certificate. So if an individual has failed the exam, they may reapply for registration with CASLPO once they have passed the profession's CETP CETP exam, and depending on their situation, the continuation of mentorship may or may not be required. So Speech, Language and Audiology Canada, SAC, is responsible for the administration of the CETP exams for audiology and speech language pathology. We've provided a link to SAC's website, which points to the information about the CETP exams for audiology and speech language pathology. So here it is. Here is SAC's website and the section with the information about the CETP exam. We just wanted to go over a little bit about the role difference between SAC and CASLPO in terms of getting registered. So SAC administers the CETP exams for audiology and speech language pathology. The exam website provides detailed information on exam, writing the exam, which includes the exam format, fees, exam sites, preparing for the exam, which includes tools and practical tips, and after the exam, which includes information on obtaining exam results, scoring, and appeal process. As the CETP exams transition from a paper format to an online format, the SAC's website will be updated at regular intervals to reflect changes in the enrollment process. CASLPO, on the other hand, we issue licenses allowing individuals to practice audiology and speech language pathology in the province of Ontario. So on CASLPO's website, we will provide information on applying for registration with CASLPO, timelines for processing an application, the fees associated with registration, details about referrals to the registration committee, the process for appealing registration committee decisions, and the mentorship program, which includes the mentorship self-assessment tool, or MSAT. So if you are applying for registration in Ontario, we would advise you to only obtain information about registration in Ontario from CASLPO's website and information about the CETP exams for audiology and speech language pathology from SAC's website. We want you to note that if you are applying to CASLPO, do not obtain information from the CAASPR website or CASPR website. However, if you are applying for registration in another province, we advise you to consult that province's regulatory body about their requirements for registration. So throughout the presentation, we have questions and scenarios that we'd like to go over with you so that you can get an idea of some of the how some of these requirements work in practical situations. So our first question is, if I am understanding the information on the website correctly, when I am registered with ACSLPA, which is the Alberta College of Speech, Language, Pathology and Audiology, I do not need the CETP exam in order to practice in Ontario, correct? And the answer is yes. If you qualify for registration in Ontario as a labor mobility applicant from Alberta, you do not need to write the CETP exam to practice in Ontario. However, to qualify for registration in Ontario, you have to meet a number of conditions. So I'll just outline those. The first being you must hold a certificate of registration that is equivalent to the certificate being issued in Ontario. So in some jurisdictions, they might offer a certificate where there is no equivalent certificate in Ontario. Therefore, labor mobility would not apply in that situation. But in general, if you hold full registration in that other jurisdiction, that would be equivalent to our general certificate of registration in Ontario. You must submit a completed labor mobility application form. You must provide information regarding your past conduct. You would have to provide a letter from every regulatory body where you currently or previously held a certificate of registration. You would also have to provide evidence of your professional experience in audiology or speech-language pathology in the 3-year period before applying for CASLPO registration. So we need your patient care or related work hours verified by your current or previous employer in Alberta as a requirement before you come to Ontario. We also, of course, when you, to issue a certificate, you need to have professional liability insurance coverage and you have to pay all applicable fees. We want you to note at this point that making a false or misleading statement or representation in respect to an application is considered an act of professional misconduct and may lead to discipline and other proceedings. I say this because we did have a situation that has come about where somebody applying for labor mobility in another jurisdiction did misrepresent themselves to the other province, and not only did they not get registered in that province, they're facing some investigations and probably going on to discipline in Ontario. So it's definitely not worth it to misrepresent yourself because you know, if you get caught, you could definitely lose your license. So the next question is, I understand I would need to complete an application for labor mobility, transferring between colleges or provinces, and was wondering how long the process takes from submitting the application to receiving registration. So the time for processing labor mobility applications, if the applicant meets all of the requirements for labor mobility, it takes approximately 15 business days to review the application and another 5 business days to issue a registration after the applicant has submitted a completed registration form. However, if the applicant does not meet the requirements for registration, the application must be referred to the registration committee for review, and that process could take up to 6 months to complete. So when the registration committee does review the application, they may require the applicant who does not meet the labor mobility requirements to undertake or obtain or undergo material additional training, experience, examinations, or assessments. So that moves nicely into our discussion about good character. So what is good character? We have a word cloud here, and you can see some of the characteristics of good character that pop out would be honesty, integrity, principles, ethical, fair, respect. However, good character in CASLPO's registration requirements has a specific definition, and it's actually defined in Section 3 of our registration regulation. So Section 3.6 says, the applicant's past and present conduct must afford reasonable grounds for the belief that the applicant does not have a physical or mental condition or disorder that may affect his or her ability to practice the profession in a safe manner, will practice the profession with integrity or decency, integrity, and honesty, and in accordance with the law, and will display an appropriate professional attitude. So that is how the regulation defines good character. So we're just going to outline a scenario that comes from the news, actually. It happened, I believe, it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. A group of male dentistry students at Dalhousie University posted sexually violent comments about female classmates on their group Facebook page. And the content of the Facebook page became public, and the university suspended the 13 students who were members of the group. So what do you think a regulatory body's registration committee should do if they receive an application from one of these students? So here are just some options. They could issue a certificate of registration. They could issue a certificate of registration if the applicant successfully completes additional training specified by the panel, such as sexual harassment awareness and prevention training. They could refuse to issue a certificate, or do you think none of these would be the right thing to do? So I guess there isn't really one answer for misconduct. So misconduct does not necessarily bar an applicant from registration, but it does trigger some sort of inquiry into the applicant's suitability to practice. So each application would be assessed by the registration committee on a case-by-case basis. And the committee would want to know what the applicant's conduct was and the details of the conduct before a decision can be made about the registration with the college. So as we've kind of looked at some of the conduct issues that could affect your registration, now we're just going to look at the process for applying for registration. I guess it's important to note about regulated professionals is that registration with CASLPO and not your university degree in audiology or speech language pathology is what gives the legal authority to use the titles of audiologist, speech language pathologist, speech therapist, or any abbreviation or variation of these titles. It also allows you to make any representation to the public that you are an individual who is qualified to practice audiology or speech language pathology in Ontario. So for healthcare professionals in Canada, self-regulation is a privilege, not a right. And when you register with CASLPO, you're joining the company of all other regulated professionals in the province, such as nurses, teachers, doctors, lawyers, engineers. Being a regulated professional is a big deal. And also, as you know, professions go along, they evolve, and part that we think part of that evolution includes the addition of an entry to practice exam, which most, if not all, health professions have in place, and most other regulators do as well. So we have, as I mentioned, scenarios, and we have used an applicant who we call Mia. And Mia has completed her master's degree program in speech language pathology at University X, and she plans to work in Ontario, but she is not registered with CASLPO yet. And Mia decides to create a LinkedIn profile. So this is what Mia's profile, parts of it say. It says, it gives her name, Mia Jones, and it says she's a speech language pathologist, pre-registered in Ottawa, Canada area. And in the summary, it says, I am a pre-registered speech language pathologist based in Ontario. I have excellent communication skills and pride myself on my ability to develop a rapport with clients and their families. So in the information, is the information on Mia's LinkedIn profile acceptable to the college? Yes or no? So whatever your answer is, we will show you where Mia has gone wrong. So the answer is no. She does not, she has used speech language pathologist pre-registered in her profile, and there you can see she's using the title speech language pathologist. Pre-registered just makes it a variation of the title, and we do not issue pre-registration, so it doesn't mean anything in terms of licensing. Also, in her summary, she says that she is a pre-registered speech language pathologist based in Ontario. So this also is part of holding herself out as qualified to practice in Ontario. So just that particular case was something that happens a few times, is that people will use particular titles either on the internet, or things are posted on their employer will employ them to act as in another role, but on the website for that company it says speech language pathologist or audiologist, and we actually find those things as we are registering people, and it becomes a problem. The application process, when you are applying for registration, I guess what we want to say is that your registration with CASLPO and the enrollment in the CETP exam are separate processes. So you can enroll in the CETP exam with SAC without having applied to CASLPO. And what we would say is that your completion of your program will be verified by your program director to SAC prior to the exam date, so that and if it's verified that you completed your program, you can write the CETP exam. With respect to the CASLPO registration process, you can submit your documents for CASLPO registration, and when we receive your application, you'll hear from us in about 3 weeks regarding any outstanding documents, or if your or to notify you whether or not your application is complete. And when we have received all your documents, we will put your application in the queue for review, and you will receive a ready to review email. And within 5 days, we will let you know your eligibility for CASLPO registration. Once you're eligible for registration, you would have to provide proof of your exam enrollment, or if you've already written the CETP exam and you have successfully passed, you can provide us with your results. And we also require that you provide us with, you must have an offer of employment when you're registering as an initial registrant, and of course a mentor as well. So the initial certificate of registration is offered to new graduates who have fulfilled the academic and good character requirements for registration, and have completed less than 750 hours of professional experience in the last 3 years. So where do you start? The place to start with your application is by completing your application form. So we have an application form for you for accredited Canadian programs. And this is how you find it on our website. You would go to apply to the college, or sorry, you would click on applicants first, and then you would see this menu on the left-hand side, and then you would click apply to the college. The menu on the left will include the Canadian graduates, and you will also see under steps to becoming registered with CASLPO. Step 1 is to download the application guide and forms for Canadian accredited programs. So if you click on that, you can download a PDF document which includes the application guide and the application forms. So part of your submission of documents to the college will include, after the application form, of course, is you must submit an official transcript from your graduate program. And so CASLPO requires an official transcript to be sent to us directly from the university. A letter from your program director verifying your completion of your master's degree program and also verifying the date on which the degree will be conferred is also required. Photocopies are not accepted. This document must be have an original signature to be accepted. I mean, it can be sent to us directly from your university's program director to the college as an email attachment, but that's only if it's coming directly from your university. There is an application fee of $150 that must be included as well. So again, original documents have your university transcripts must be original. They should be sent in a university sealed envelope or an official e-transcript if that is available. So usually e-transcripts are very secure and password protected and all of that, and come directly from your university. The letter from your program director, as I mentioned, must be can be emailed to us directly from the university. So how long does the process take? So once your application form is received, it will take up to 3 weeks for us to review your documents. In an email, we will let you know which documents have been received and if any are outstanding. Once we have received all your documents, we will send a ready to review email to give you or to let you know that your application is in the queue for application review. The registration eligibility review may take up to 1 week to complete from the date the ready to review email is sent, unless an issue has been identified. So the college is committed to processing applications as quickly as possible in order that each application, or sorry, in the order that each application is received in completed form. So please resist the temptation of calling the college to check on the status of your application, because it does slow our processing of applications significantly when we get a lot of these kinds of calls. So again, Mia is concerned that her courier company didn't send her application package properly. Should Mia contact the college to confirm the receipt of her application? Yes or no? I guess just to let you know, right now, because we are operating a virtual office, we aren't accepting courier packages right now anyway. So, but when things open up again and normal business resumes, this would be more applicable. So should Mia contact the college to confirm the receipt of her application? And we would say no. Once we have received your application form, you will receive an email from us within 3 weeks indicating which documents we have received and if any remain outstanding. We will not have any information to provide to you before that time. And as I was mentioning, during COVID, we are currently operating a virtual office and there are no walk-ins or walk-in visits accepted at the college. I mean, it's because we're not there. We're all working from home right now. And CASLPO's registration services, however, are continuing to be provided, and the application processing timelines may require adjustments during this period, simply because mail service does take longer than other forms of getting applications. But you can send some of your documents to us via email as PDF attachments. So we have another scenario from Mia. Mia calls Jessica Lafarette, who is our program assistant at CASLPO, and she says, I have been offered my dream job, and the employer says I need to start in 2 weeks. I am just about to submit my application to CASLPO. If I am not registered in 2 weeks, I will lose this job opportunity. Should CASLPO push this file to the top of the queue so that she can start her employment in time? A, yes, B, no. And basically, we cannot do this. CASLPO must provide an impartial, transparent, and fair process for all applicants as required by the Office of the Fairness Commissioner. So if we advance Mia's file because of her dream job, it would be unfair to others, maybe you, who submitted your application earlier and may also be waiting to start your dream job. Then Mia's potential employer calls Jessica and says, I would like to hire this graduating student for a position we have. We need her to start in 2 weeks. Otherwise, the children at the center will not get the services they are entitled to. Should CASLPO push this file to the top of the queue so that she can start her employment in time? Yes or no? So again, the answer is no. CASLPO again must be impartial, transparent, and fair when we process all applicants. And if we advance Mia's file because the children of that center would not receive services, it would definitely be unfair to the other applicants who have submitted their applications earlier and who also may be in a similar position of waiting to provide service to clients who an employer has hired them to provide services to. So once the college has confirmed in an email that the application is complete, applications will be placed in a queue for review, and we do not deviate from that order. So our advice to you is to plan ahead and speak honestly to your potential employers about the application timelines. We have documents on our website that outline our timelines. You should probably, you can download them and send them to your employer and let them know where you are in the process. We reiterate that it's not possible for CASLPO to expedite any applications. So a complete application is reviewed by college staff to determine if all of the college registration requirements are met. And if the application is approved, you will be notified by email that you are now eligible for registration with the college. So once you've completed the application review process, you move to the registration process. So the registration process can only begin after a successful application. And when you have been deemed eligible for registration, you will receive an initial certificate registration form from CASLPO's program assistant after the review has happened. So the registration process, in order to complete that, as an initial registrant, you must have secured an offer of employment in Ontario to work as either an audiologist or a speech language pathologist. So when you're completing our registration form, you must include the following information or items. So the first is you have to complete the form itself. And once we get the form, it takes about 5 business days to process that form. So you should note that with respect to your employment start date. The initial certificate registration form also includes your mentor's name. So before you get registered with the college, you have to find out who will be your mentor and include that information on your initial certificate registration form. We also ask you to provide proof of your that you have enrolled in the CETP exam for your profession, and or proof of your successful exam results. We have a little asterisk beside that first part of proof of enrollment, because if the enrollment period has not begun when you are submitting your registration form to the college will provide you with directions for providing an acceptable alternative. We also ask you to include your employment start date on your registration form. However, if you do not know when you will be starting employment, then we would it's fine to just put pending completion of registration with CASLPO, and we'll proceed. We also ask that you include your employment information. So information related to your practice location is required. And we also ask you to provide us with your direct report or manager's contact information, their name and their email address. You are required to have professional liability insurance coverage. And we ask you to provide the name of the carrier, the policy certificate number, the expiry date, and you must have coverage at a minimum of $2 million per claim. We would say that in some cases, your employer will provide you with professional liability insurance coverage as part of your employment with them, and you would have to make sure that it meets the college's requirements in terms of being at least $2 million per claim, and we would accept that insurance coverage. However, if your employer does not provide you with coverage, you would have to obtain that coverage on your own. And if you are a student member of the professional association, SAC or OSLA, you could get insurance from those professional associations. Also, we require you to provide a document which provides proof of your eligibility to work in Canada. If you're a Canadian citizen, you can provide us with proof of your Canadian birth certificate, a valid Canadian passport, just opened up to the page that shows your citizenship. A photocopy of that is fine. A photocopy of your Canadian citizenship card, front and back. If you're a permanent resident, you can provide us with a photocopy of your record of landing or your permanent resident card. If you're here on a work permit, we would need to see a copy of that valid work permit. We also require you to submit a registration fee of $50. And you are required to pay a prorated annual fee. CASLPO prorates the annual fee when you first become a registrant of the college. So if you get registered at the beginning of the registration period, you pay the full amount. However, the proration happens in quarters. So if you become registered in the last quarter, you'd only pay 1/4 of the fee. Sorry, just on that note again, there was a link on that page to the, oops, sorry. I keep going ahead. So there's a link showing the where the fee chart is for a college, so you can get the information about the correct amount to include with your application by going to that section of the website. So once you have received once we have received all the required documents for registration, it takes about 5 business days to issue a certificate of registration to you. So congratulations, you'll be a registered member of CASLPO. And so we'd say that until you receive your registration number, you are not registered. But when you get that registration number, you're good to go. We also want to let you know that for CASLPO, the renewal of all certificates happens annually. So you have to renew your certificate on or before October 1st of each year. So when you first become registered, if you get registered before October 1st, you will be paying, as I said, for the last quarter of the registration period, but you'd have to renew your certificate by October 1st and pay for the coming registration period, which would be the full year. We have a few more questions about Mia. She has asked if she can start working as an audiologist or a speech language pathologist when she submits her application to CASLPO. Yes or no? So the answer to that is no. An individual cannot begin to work as an audiologist or a speech language pathologist until they have been issued a certificate of registration by CASLPO. And as I mentioned, you need to have received your registration number. And the college has a bunch of FAQs on our website. So we encourage you to have a look. You'll see under the Canadian Graduates tab, right under the title, you'll see a bunch of FAQs. We will say as well that this is the page that you will go to get a copy of the registration slides. In about a week, they'll be posted there along with this video. We also have information on our website about the CETP exam. So we update this information as well periodically. So you'll see changes every now and again whenever we get new information from SAC. We try and reflect that enrollment process on our website. So I guess we can open up for questions.
Hi, Colleen. We have got a lot of questions. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to get to all of them in this. Oh, hold on one second. Sorry guys, question box just popped out. Let me pop it back. Okay. So I have a few that I've marked. The first one is, I'm wondering what we should call ourselves if we work with a provisional license.
Okay, so you are, if you mean by provisional, if you mean the initial certificate of registration, you are, once you're registered, an initial certificate is considered registered with college. So you, as an initial registrant, you can use the professional titles of audiologist or speech language pathologist. We don't have any different titles for different certificates other than the non-practicing certificate, in which they can still use speech language pathologists or audiologists, but they also have to indicate that they're non-practicing beside their title. So, but if you're initial, if you're general, if you're academic, you can just use the title audiologist or speech language pathologist.
Great. Is it possible to start the registration process with CASLPO as an initial registrant prior to signing up for the CETP exam, because the earliest date for enrollment is July 15th?
As I said, we will, if there is no enrollment at the time that you are applying to complete your registration, we will just give you an alternative process to do. So yes, you'll definitely be able to become registered. You'll just have to do something other than submit an enrollment form. We might have you sign something that says when enrollment opens, we'll send CASLPO that form at a later date. So it would just be a promise to send us it later. But we'll definitely allow you to proceed with your registration if enrollment's not open yet.
I have another question. How can we obtain a letter of employment to start our initial certification process if we cannot let potential employers know when we can start working, because we have to complete our certification process first?
We don't.
Oh yeah, go.
Yeah, sorry, we don't require a letter of employment. However, I guess what we, you do have to secure, I guess what you mean by maybe a letter of employment is a job offer.
Yes.
So you can, when you apply for jobs, you can definitely represent the education that you've obtained. And so that's something that you can definitely do. You just can't use the professional titles at all. And once you have, if they offer you a position pending registration with the college, our application form requires you to include your employment information, like where you're going to work and some details about the position itself, but not actually a letter from your employer or anything like that.
All right, and I have one more question. This one came today via email. For students who will be applying for jobs in 2 different provinces, so say they want to apply for jobs in Ontario and BC, so I am interpreting this to mean that they want to apply for registration as well in Ontario and BC. Are they expected to write the 2 different licensing exams that each province has endorsed, Ontario CETP and the practice exam?
Okay, so I guess what we would say to that is that applying for a job is different than actually working in a province. So once you start to work in or if you plan to work in a province, you do need to have the correct license for that. I would say you can start, for us, the CETP exam can be done when you go into the, when you've actually been issued an initial certificate and you're going to be registered and you're going to be working in Ontario. So once you've committed to that, you can start the application process in both provinces, but, and I believe Ontario and BC both allow registration before you actually sit the exam. But if you go to, if you decide to actually take the job in BC, then you need to do the praxis exam. But if you decide to actually take the job in Ontario, you need to do the CETP exam. So it's at the point that you are actually committed to working in that province. I think that would determine which exam you write.
Okay. I think that's it for time. I think we have to, because it's after 7.
Okay, so we are going to take that 5-minute bio break. And so we'll be back at around 7:05. Okay, and we'll be back with Smita's mentorship presentation.
Okay, so hello everyone. I hope that that was enough time for a quick bio break. I'm going to get started now with the next section of the presentation. Jessica, can I just get a thumbs up from you that you're good to go?
I am.
Okay, great. So hi everybody, good evening. I'm Samita Joglekar. I'm the manager of the mentorship program and the audiology advisor for the college. And so I'm going to tell you about CASLPO's mentorship program now. So why does CASLPO have mentorship? Well, firstly, mentorship is a condition of your initial certificate of registration. So it is a registration requirement that is in the regulation. So all of you who plan to become registered to practice in Ontario and to practice in Ontario as initial registrants will be required to complete a mentorship. Another reason for mentorship is that it introduces you as an initial registrant and mentee to CASLPO's quality assurance program through an online self-assessment tool and a process of practice evaluation. So the quality assurance program is a program that you will be involved with every year that you are a CASLPO registrant moving forward. So the process that you go through in mentorship, it helps to prepare you to be involved in the quality assurance program on an ongoing basis throughout your career in Ontario. And then we have a picture of part of the college's mission and mandate, which is to serve and protect the public interest. So that is another reason why CASLPO has mentorship, because mentorship serves as another way for the college to confirm your competency to practice. And as I'll explain, a big part of mentorship is reviewing the practice standards and ensuring that you meet those standards. So that is another big purpose that mentorship serves for the college. So let's go through the basics of mentorship. So the mentorship period is a minimum of 6 months for everyone. During this time, you must provide at least 500 hours of patient care. You can do more, but you can't do less. And your mentor must provide you with at least 48 hours of guidance. And again, your mentor could provide more than that, but not less. And this guidance could be direct or indirect. In the program guidelines, we describe the difference between direct and indirect. We ask that the guidance be spread over time. So we recommend 2 hours per week or perhaps 1 day a month over the 6 months, but we don't want you to get all your 48 hours at the beginning or middle or end. It should be equally spread out over the 6 months. And some direct observation of your practice is mandatory. So a question that we received is, how many direct observation hours are required during the mentorship? So the answer to this question is that the college doesn't specify the number of hours for direct observation because it will depend on the practice environment that you're working in, your skills and confidence, and also the level of risk related to the clinical area. So for example, during your mentorship, if you're working at a hospital versus for a school board or for a private practice, that would be different. Perhaps you've had some exposure to certain clinical areas during your clinical placements, but not in other areas. So that might have an impact on your skills and confidence level. And then also, if you're working in an area as a speech language pathologist, like swallowing assessments, or in audiology in vestibular, for example, there could be different risks associated with that practice area. So basically, you are going to decide with your mentor how much direct observation is going to be needed during your mentorship based on those factors I just mentioned. Your mentor will also decide how much direct observation is needed to confirm that you meet standards, because that's a big responsibility that your mentor has during the mentorship to confirm that you are meeting the practice standards and expectations in Ontario. And you can refer to the mentorship program guidelines for more information on guidance and observation. And I'll show you where to find that document later in the presentation. So continuing with the basics of mentorship, you and your mentor will complete the mentorship self-assessment tool, we call that the MSAT, over the course of the mentorship period. And the MSAT includes a self-assessment on the practice standards and uploading evidence to show how you meet those standards. And it also includes the clinical reasoning tool at the midterm. So we do require to complete this clinical reasoning tool with your mentor when you reach that halfway point at your midterm evaluation. And then using the MSAT, your mentor also assesses you on the practice standards and will submit a midterm and final report to the college via the online tool. So let's talk a little bit about mentorship extensions, because we do get several questions on whether or not you can extend your mentorship. So whether or not you can extend your mentorship will depend on if you start your mentorship after you've passed the CETP exam versus if you start your mentorship before you've written the CETP exam. As Colleen explained, you can become an initial registrant of CASLPO before you have sat the exam. So that would mean you could start your practice and you could start your mentorship. But that will impact on how we are able to extend your mentorship. So if you start your mentorship after you've already passed the exam, then your mentorship may be extended if a formal request is approved by the college. So we review all of the requests that come in, and extensions are granted in 3-month intervals. But it's important to know that your mentorship period cannot exceed 24 months from the date of your initial CASLPO registration. So there is that 2-year time limit for your mentorship to be completed. So let's talk about if you start your mentorship before you've passed the exam. So in that case, your mentorship period will be extended automatically to allow you to enroll in the next available CETP exam and receive your exam results. And if you pass the exam, and then if you need more time to complete your mentorship, a formal request would be submitted and approved, as I just explained. But if you don't pass the CETP exam, then you cannot continue with your practice, and therefore you can't continue with your mentorship. So in that case, you must transfer patients to a colleague or prepare them for discharge within 30 days. And you also have to inform your mentor that you are required to stop practicing and that your mentorship will be on hold until you have passed the exam and your registration has been reinstated by CASLPO. So you might be wondering, how can I resume my mentorship in this case if this were to happen? So in this case, the college will determine how your mentorship may be resumed after you've passed the exam and your initial certificate has been reinstated. So this will depend on how your mentorship was progressing before it was put on hold. If it's confirmed that your mentorship was progressing well before it was put on hold, then you may be able to resume where you left off with the same or maybe with a new mentor. If for some reason your mentorship was not progressing well before it was put on hold, then college staff will contact you about beginning your MSAT and your mentorship again. Okay, so let's talk about mentorship versus supervision, because these are different. So during mentorship, you, as an initial registrant at that time, are accountable for your clinical work and decisions. So what does it mean to be accountable? What does being accountable mean? And I'll just take a pause for a moment, and maybe you can think about this. So what does it mean to be accountable? And you could maybe jot down some words that you associate with accountability on a piece of paper, or if you're on your computer, of course, you could type them out. But just take a moment to think about that. So what does it mean to be accountable? And how is that different from how it was when you were a student, for example? So we have another word cloud here. And You can see the word accountability in the center and then other words that you might associate with accountability, such as being responsible, honest, reliable, having integrity. And so really being accountable as an audiologist or speech language pathologist, once you become a regulated health professional, it means that you are a professional who is expected and required to explain your actions and decisions. So moving on from that, what does it mean to be a professional? What is professionalism? Well, really, if you think about it, it's an attitude and a personal philosophy that you bring to your working life. So for example, it's the desire to always improve and learn and become better in your practice. It's knowing your limitations in your knowledge and scope of practice and being honest about your limitations. It's being a leader rather than always following when you have the opportunity to lead. Doing your best even when it's challenging. That's an important one. Always putting your patients first and maintaining professional boundaries. Those are some examples of professionalism and that attitude and personal philosophy. But professionalism is also a set of behaviors. So being responsible and reliable, courteous, fair, honest, showing integrity and being respectful. So for example, if you're late arriving to work or to a meeting, taking responsibility for that and maybe apologizing to your colleagues and taking steps to make sure that that doesn't happen next time. So we have another scenario with Mia, who is now an initial registrant SLP, and she's working as an independent contractor during her mentorship. So she's told by a senior colleague that consent for assessment doesn't need to be documented in the patient record. But this is incorrect. Both consent for assessment and treatment must be documented according to CASLPO standards and Ontario legislation. So let's consider this scenario from the perspective of accountability and professionalism. So it turns out that regrettably, a complaint is filed to the college that involves Mia. And during the investigation of the complaint, patient records are reviewed and it's confirmed that consent for assessment was not documented. So Mia is asked to explain why she didn't document consent, and her explanation is the following. So she says, I was told by a senior colleague that this was okay, so I trusted them and I didn't question it. I didn't want to create tension between me and my employer by asking too many questions, and I was new and I didn't realize this was wrong. So our question for you is, do you think Mia's justification for her actions and decisions is reasonable from an accountability and professionalism perspective? So I'll give you a moment to consider that. And the answer to this is no, that justification would not be acceptable. Being naive isn't a defense. So coming back to our slide on what does it mean to be accountable, it means that Mia is a professional. She's expected and required to explain her actions and decisions. And so this is a change that happens. This is an evolution in your who you are. When you're a student studying in your master's degree program, when you do your clinical placements, you have a supervisor and you are supervised. And it's your supervisor who is accountable for the clinical care and the decisions that are made. But when you become an initial registrant of CASLPO, as Colleen explained, it is a big deal because you're now recognized by the public as a speech language pathologist or audiologist, and you're allowed to use those titles. So that also means that you're responsible and accountable for the decisions that you make and the clinical care that you provide. And of course, when we all start our careers, we have lots of questions and we're still learning lots of things. So that's another reason why the mentorship is important and is important to us as well. That you have an experienced colleague who is your mentor, who you can talk to about your practice and who can help you understand the practice standards and can help ensure that you're meeting those standards. So let's talk a little bit about your mentor's role, because as we're discussing, mentors are not supervisors. Your mentor is there to provide guidance and support to help you understand and apply practice standards, to help you improve your competence, and to help you apply principles of sound clinical judgment. Your mentor will be observing and discussing your practice with you in relation to the standards. And they will also be assessing if you meet the standards during your mentorship. And they will be submitting those reports of your progress to the college. So what are the practice standards? Well, these are the minimum performance expectations of all SLPs and audiologists practicing in Ontario in all practice settings. So the practice standards are outlined in the mentorship self-assessment tool. When you log into that tool, you're going to see all of the standards listed there. And those standards in the MSAT are very principle-based. So they are standards that apply to all SLPs and audiologists in every practice setting. But then there are also area-specific standards. So for example, there's a standard for the assessment of adults and children by SLPs. There's a standard for dysphagia. And for audiologists, there are practice standards for the provision of hearing aid services. So those also make up the practice standards, area-specific, but then also principle-based standards that apply across the board to all of us as professionals in every practice setting. So we wanted to give you some more specific examples of these standards. So in the mentorship self-assessment tool, the standards are outlined as categories with then practice indicators that fall under each category. So I'll show you what those categories are. There's 5 of them. There's the management practices category that has 9 indicators, and I've given you an example there. There's the clinical practice category with 6 indicators. Patient-centered practice, communication, and professional accountability. So under each of these categories, there are several indicators or standards. And so let's take a look at one. So if you look at clinical practice, indicator 2.5, I monitor, evaluate, and modify my intervention procedures based on patient outcome. So that is an example of a standard that you're going to be reflecting and assessing yourself on whether or not you meet that standard, providing some evidence to show that you meet it, and then your mentor is going to talk to you about your practice and also evaluate you on this standard. So let's talk about getting started with your mentorship. So after you become an initial registrant, you're going to review the mentorship program guidelines and discuss the guidelines with your CASLPO approved mentor. And then you are going to submit a mentorship contract to the college within 30 days of beginning your employment. So basically, you have 30 days to review the contract, to discuss how the mentorship is going to go with your mentor, and then to submit that contract. And when I say CASLPO approved mentor, I say that because we do have criteria for general registrants who are going to mentor. So these criteria are in the mentorship program guidelines. They're in the website FAQs. And there's also a document called a Did You Know that we have that outlines these 8 criteria that general registrants have to meet before they can be your mentor. So it's important that you know about these criteria, and when you're talking to SLPs and audiologists who are proposing to be your mentor, share this criteria with them. They might already know it exists, but you can also share it with them. And I'll show you where to find the mentorship information on the website. So when you go to the main website of the college, you're going to click on applicants, And then in the left-hand bar menu, you'll see a box that appears for mentorship. You're going to click on that mentorship box, and it's going to take you to a mentorship overview page. And if you scroll down on that mentorship overview page, you will find a chart that has the mentorship program guidelines, the mentorship contract, and those mentor criteria. And on that page as well are many, many helpful FAQs. So I really encourage you to go to this web page because there's a lot of good information there. I know right now you're probably thinking about application and registration and getting through those two processes and the exam, of course, but eventually you will be thinking about mentorship again. So you will have this slide presentation you can look back on, and then you'll have the web page that has all the information there. So in the mentorship contract, let's talk about some of the important points that you'll need to discuss with your mentor. So of course you want to discuss your start date, and that start date must be on or after your date of initial registration with CASLPO. You're also going to want to discuss the process and requirements for mentoring, so reviewing those standards and indicators, how you will achieve your 500 patient care hours and those 48 mentored guidance hours. So you'll want to discuss where, how, and when you're going to be meeting with your mentor and how often. You're going to want to talk about the methods of evaluation and feedback. So is it going to be written, verbal, in person, using video conferencing, using the MSAT comment boxes, which I'll show you. So where and when this is all going to happen. And then we also ask you to identify a third party for conflict resolution in the mentorship contract. So as I mentioned before, you and your mentor will use the mentorship self-assessment tool throughout the mentorship period. So this is a tool that's meant for you to use over the course or over those 6 months of mentorship. And the MSAT allows for the following. So it allows you to assess your own practice based on the standards. It allows your mentor to assess your practice based on the standards. There is the ability for you to upload evidence files into the MSAT to show that you're meeting standards and to have an exchange with your mentor using comment boxes. There's a learning goals section. And then, as I mentioned, mentors are submitting those midterm and final evaluation reports to the college using the MSAT. So you and your mentor will gain access to the MSAT when your mentorship contract is approved. So we review all the contracts that are submitted. We make sure that the mentor that you have listed on your contract meets those 8 criteria that I mentioned. And then once your contract is approved, you will receive an email communication from the college. And this email contains instructions for how to log into the MSAT. And the instructions on how to complete the MSAT are also within the MSAT itself and in the mentorship program guidelines. So let me show you on the website where you find information about the mentorship self-assessment tool. So when you're on that mentorship overview page, in that left-hand bar menu, you'll see a box that appears for the MSAT. If you click on it, that takes you to another web page that has information specifically about the mentorship self-assessment tool. That's where you can access the MSAT. And you can see there are also FAQs there, including how do I log into the MSAT. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the mentorship self-assessment tool. So we launched this tool in 2019. We actually brought the mentorship process online in 2019. And I'd just like to bring your attention to the items of support, promote, and help. So one of the big things that the MSAT has done is it's supported distance mentoring. And that has become really important over the last 14 months or so during the pandemic, where mentors and mentees have not been able to be together. So it's been very nice to have this online tool for mentorship that allows distance mentoring to happen a little bit easier. The MSAT is also promoting communication and collaboration between the mentor and the mentee, because you can log into the tool from wherever you are, and your mentor can log in from wherever they are, and you can sort of communicate and collaborate using the tool. And it's also helping to clarify roles and responsibilities of mentors and mentees. So we thought it was also important to let you know that some new practice standards were introduced in the MSAT in 2020. So when you start your mentorship and log into your MSAT, you're going to see these new practice standards. So we have one on conflict of interest under management practices. There is a clinical reasoning practice standard, which is 3.7. I use clinical reasoning at every phase of intervention. And as I mentioned earlier, you will be completing the clinical reasoning tool during your mentorship at the midterm time point as a way of ensuring that you meet this standard. There is also a new standard for advertising, and there is a standard for professionalism. So here are some screenshots of the MSAT to give you an idea of what it looks like. So when you log into the MSAT on the landing page, this is what the landing page will look like. And you can see here on the left, the 4 sections of the MSAT are listed that you will be working through over that 6-month period. So you've got the professional standards section, the midterm report with the due date listed, the learning goals section, and the final report with the due date listed. In the top right-hand corner, as a mentee, you can click on Mentee Resources and you'll find lots of helpful documents there, including an extension request form, as well as some other forms that may be applicable or helpful to you. And then there's lots of guidance documents and then a chart in the center that outlines the different sections of the MSAT and when those are to be completed. At the top of each section of the MSAT, you will find instructions. So here we're looking at the top of the professional practice standards and indicators section, and you'll see that there are some short instructions at the top that guide you on how to work through the section. If you need even more guidance, there's always going to be this need help with this section. Click here, and if you click, it'll open up another document that's more detailed with screenshots that guides you on exactly how to work through that section of the MSAT. This is looking a little more closely at the professional practice standards and indicators section. So this just shows you that how the standards are listed. So here we're looking at the management practices category, and the practice standard here is 1.2, I maintain records, which accurately reflect the services provided. So under each standard or indicator, you can click on an arrow that opens up some examples of how you would meet that standard. And then here, this is the column for you as the mentee, where you rate yourself on that standard. You can put comments in to explain how you meet the standard, or maybe questions for your mentor if you don't understand that standard or need further help with it. And then you'll be uploading evidence to show yourself and your mentor that you meet that standard. And then your mentor has a similar column. So your mentor can see the standard, your rating, your comments, your evidence, and then they provide a rating for you on the practice standard based on the discussions that you're having with them and the review of patient records and so on. And then they provide you with a rating and they can put a comment in the comment box. So just to review all of this that we've gone through over the course of your mentorship, what will you be doing? So you will be assessing your own practice and reflecting on how you are meeting practice standards. And you're going to be doing this through discussions with your mentor, through those 48 guidance hours, through the clinical reasoning tool, and then also, of course, in your MSAT. You're going to provide comments and evidence to demonstrate that you're meeting practice standards, and you do this in your MSAT. You're going to set 3 learning goals during your mentorship and work towards achieving those goals. And we ask you to set those goals at the midterm time point. So based on the first half of your mentorship, you reflect and figure out during that time, what are the standards that I need to work on to understand them better, or what are the areas in my practice that I want to work on? And then you establish the goals. We ask you to use SMART goal methodology for that. That's in the mentorship program guidelines. and then you track those learning goals in your MSAT. You're going to discuss your self-assessment, evidence, and learning goals with your mentor at your midterm and final evaluation meetings. And then we ask you to prepare 5 charts for your mentor to review at the midterm and final evaluation meetings. So for a total of 10 charts over your mentorship. And what will your mentor be doing? So over the course of your mentorship, your mentor will be providing you with that general guidance on professional practice. They will be providing guidance on the standards and how to apply them in your practice. At the midterm and final evaluation meetings, your mentor is going to review your MSAT, including your assessment, your evidence, your comments, your learning goals. They're going to review those 5 patient records to confirm that record-keeping standards are met. They're going to also assess and confirm that you're meeting those practice standards. And they're going to submit the reports to the college. And importantly, we ask mentors to recommend you, based on your mentorship, for a general certificate of registration. So your mentor makes that important determination at the end of the mentorship to recommend you for your general certificate. And they do that in your final report in the MSAT. So what happens after your mentorship is completed? Well, a general certificate will be issued to you when the following 3 things have happened. So first, you have to finish your mentorship successfully. You have to have completed the CETP exam and passed that exam. And if applicable, you have to fulfill any outstanding orders issued by any committee. Once you have your general certificate, there are certain things that have to happen for you to maintain that general certificate. So to maintain your general registration, you have to provide 750 hours of patient care or related work in audiology or speech-language pathology during every 3-year period. And that first 3-year period begins on the day that you are issued your general certificate. And you also have to meet the requirements of the quality assurance program to maintain your general registration or certificate. So what does that mean? That means every year you'll be completing a self-assessment tool called the SAT, and you'll be establishing 3 learning goals for your practice. And you'll be engaging in continuing education. And at CASLPO continuing education, we call it Continuous Learning Activity Credits, or CLACs. And you could possibly be selected for a peer assessment. So as you can see, all of the things that you'll have to do as a general registrant are quite similar to what we ask you to do during mentorship. So that means that having gone through the mentorship, you'll be well prepared for that. So that is a really good thing. So we've come to some questions, and this is actually a question that we received. So this question is, can I work alone in a different clinic than my mentor, as long as by the end of the 6 months of mentorship, my mentor has provided 48 hours of guidance? So the answer to this question is yes, it is possible for you to work in a different clinic or setting than your mentor. This could happen, for example, if you work for an employer that has multiple sites, so multiple clinics, and your mentor works at one site and you work at another site. That would be okay. However, you must stay in contact with your mentor on a regular basis because those 48 hours of guidance have to be carried out. And as I've explained, your mentor has that important responsibility of confirming that you meet standards. So you need to be having those practice discussions with your mentor, doing those clinical reasoning tool discussions, and talking to your mentor about your practice on a regular basis so that your mentor can properly assess you on the standards. So the guidance must occur, and again, it must be at least those 48 hours of indirect or direct guidance. It can be more than 48 hours, but it has to be at least those 48 hours. So we have a series of true or false questions. So let's look at this one, true or false. I'll have 2 jobs, in other words, 2 employers during my mentorship. Therefore, I need to have 2 mentors, one for each employment setting. So do you think this is true or false? And this is false. So you must have only one designated mentor for your primary employment setting. And we say that's where you will be working most of the time. And the reason for this is because we cannot have multiple mentors logging into the mentorship self-assessment tool. There has to be one mentor who takes responsibility for completing the MSAT. So if you're going to have more than one employment setting, your mentor must be aware of other employment that you have and the type of work that you're doing in that setting. And you have to document your patient care hours at the other employment setting to count those hours towards your mentorship period. And in the MSAT, there is a patient care hours tracking form that we provided you there. So you can use that form if it's helpful. If another way is easier, you can do it another way. But you do need to track those hours if you want to count them, because your mentor has to confirm that you've completed the 500 hours of patient care. And your mentor can also contact colleagues that you work with to confirm details about your practice in another setting. So let's look at the next question, true or false. Most employers that hire new SLPs and audiologists know about CASLPO's mentorship program and its requirements. And the answer to this is actually false. So some employers will know about mentorship, they've had experience and they know what is involved in mentorship, but there are going to be some employers who may not know. So please ensure that when you're applying for positions and discussing your employment, ensure that your potential employers understand that it's mandatory for you to complete the 6-month mentorship and what that will involve. And of course, the website and the documents are there to help you. And you should share these documents with your mentor and your employer. So the next question, if I can't find a mentor, the college will find one for me. True or false? So the answer is false. So the college won't find a mentor for you, but the college can assist you by providing a list of registrants to contact. So these are registrants who have agreed to be contacted for mentoring, but you will be responsible to contact them and discuss whether they can mentor you. And it's important that if your mentor will be external to where you're going to be employed, you really need to discuss the requirements of the mentorship with your employer to ensure that this arrangement will work. Because as I explained, your mentor needs to provide those 48 hours of guidance. They need to review patient records and they need to observe you. Some direct observation is mandatory, so you'll need to discuss that if this is the situation with your potential employer. So the next true or false question, true or false? My mentor at my primary employment setting, for example, a hospital, doesn't have experience working for the school board, and that will be my other part-time job during my mentorship. So since my mentor doesn't have this experience, she can't mentor me for the work I do in the school board. Do you think that's true or false? And the answer is, that is false. So it's preferable, but mentors are not required to have experience in every area of practice you may work in. Your mentor can still evaluate if you meet the practice standards of the college because, as I explained, these standards are principles that apply across all practice settings. Now, having said that, it could be that your mentor, because they don't have experience in this other area that you're working in, maybe they don't feel comfortable and they feel it would be better if you had someone in the other practice setting who could provide some of the guidance and who they could collaborate with. So we do allow that. We allow collaborators. So your mentor can collaborate with other SLPs or audiologists in another setting to provide some of that guidance. But again, it's only that one designated mentor who takes the responsibility of filling out your MSAT and doing all of those other things. So if you're in this situation, you can have a collaborator, and there's information on collaborators in the mentorship program guidelines and in the FAQs on the website. So please have a look at that information if that's applicable to your situation. And I think this is our last true or false question. So true or false, I'm allowed to change mentors in the middle of my mentorship period. For example, if I change jobs or if my mentor goes on leave? And the answer to this question is true. It's possible to change mentors during your mentorship period. However, you do have to submit a new mentorship contract. So once you establish who that new mentor is going to be, you need to fill out the contract with them and submit it to the college. And your MSAT will need to be updated with your new mentor's information. Depending on where you are in your mentorship when this happens, a written statement from your first mentor may be required, depending on how far along you are. So please contact the college early if you realize that this is going to happen, so that we can assist you with this transition. So that is the end of the mentorship section of the presentation. And Jessica, we can take some questions if there are some questions.
I have had a ton of questions. I haven't been able to, I've been trying to respond to people in the chat. I've also flagged some. We might not be able to get to everyone's questions today as we have 12 minutes, but I do want to start with some mentorship questions as this is the section that we are on.
Okay.
And so I'm going to start with this one. How does extension of the mentorship program work in cases where you're not able to get many client hours because of the job? Example, a casual position where you only work 1 or 2 days a week.
Okay, so this has happened. We've heard that this has happened to several initial registrants who are in their mentorship. So in that case, you do have to have, you have to do 500 hours of patient care over your mentorship. So we ask that you have at least 250 hours by the midterm. So you do half in the first half and 250 in the second half. So if you realize that it's a position where you're not accumulating enough hours, then look at when your midterm report is due, and about a month before that, submit an extension request. So that extension request form is in your MSAT. You fill it out. We ask you several questions in that form, such as why is it that you haven't been able to achieve your hours? How many additional weeks do you think you'll need? And sometimes we know this can be unpredictable, but you fill out the form, you submit it to us, and we review it, and we will give you that extension. So as long as it's a reasonable reason that you're asking for the extension, and this is a reasonable situation, then we would give you that extension. And if you need to ask for another extension, that would also be okay. So monitor that and look at when your midterm is coming up, and then you can submit that extension request.
All right, next question. For the MSAT, do you need to select I meet the standard in all areas or in a certain number of areas in order to pass your mentorship?
Okay, that's a good question. So basically, all of those practice standards are important and need to be met by the end of your mentorship. So without going into too much detail, because we don't have time today, but you'll learn and you'll see in your mentorship that there are certain standards that have a little red flag next to them, and those standards, we want you to have met those standards by your midterm. It doesn't mean they're more important, but we have flagged them that you should have met those by your midterm. But all of the standards are important, and you need to meet them by the end of your mentorship. So, you should be honest during the mentorship, obviously. It's important for your learning process. If you need to learn more, then you can give yourself the rating of I need work. But by the end of your mentorship, you do need to meet all of those standards. And if you feel you're not meeting them by the end of the mentorship, or if your mentor feels you're not meeting them, then that's another reason to extend the mentorship. So that has also happened, and if that needs to happen, that is okay. But it's important that you be honest with yourself about whether you're meeting a standard or not. And by the end, we want you, it's not, you need to be meeting all of those standards by the end.
Thank you, Samita. My next question is re-mentorship. If we begin our mentorship, fail the exam, stop working for 6 months, then pass the exam, do we have to restart our mentorship?
Okay, thanks. So like I explained earlier, It's going to depend on how the mentorship was going, right? So we can see in the MSAT, I mean, particularly if you got up to the midterm and your mentor submitted your midterm report, we can see your mentor's comments and your comments and how generally the mentorship was progressing. So if that happens and you have to take a break and put your mentorship on hold, once you've passed the exam and you're registered with CASLPO again, we're going to look at how the mentorship was progressing. And if it was going well and we have a statement from your mentor, like the midterm report, to say things were going well and you had achieved this 300 patient care hours, then we would allow you, I would say, to just pick up where you left off. Okay, but if we don't have evidence that the mentorship was progressing well, then that would be the situation where we are going to ask you to start again from the beginning.
Okay. My next question is, oh, I lost it. Oh, my page froze. Hold on one second. Can I provide virtual care services during my mentorship in provinces outside of Ontario?
Okay, thank you. I'll start with that response and then maybe Colleen will want to add something. The answer is, when you're registered to practice in Ontario with CASLPO, it means that you're only registered to practice in Ontario. So that counts for virtual care as well. So you could provide virtual care to patients who are in Ontario with your CASLPO registration. If you're going to be providing virtual care to patients who are in another province, like BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, then you need to inquire with the regulatory colleges in those provinces and maybe possibly become registered to practice with them also. Because it's where the patient is located, that's where you're providing the care. Okay, so if that's going to happen, you will need to look at what those other provinces require in terms of their regulatory bodies, and you'll need to find out if they need you to become registered before you can provide virtual care to patients who are in those other provinces. Colleen, is there anything you would want to add in addition?
Absolutely. I would say that, again, because you're dealing with another jurisdiction and other practice standards related to that jurisdiction, we would say that CASLPO's practice standards only apply in Ontario, and we would, in terms of your record of patient care hours, it would be only relevant to the patient care provided in Ontario. So you can definitely work in more than one province, but again, you would have to be properly registered in each jurisdiction. And if that jurisdiction has a regulatory body, of course, and the patient care that you do for mentorship would be the patient care that was happening in Ontario only.
Right.
So this question is sort of similar, but it's asking, can I have a remote mentorship? Do I have to be face-to-face in the same location as my mentor?
Okay, so the answer to that is you can have a remote or a virtual mentorship. That's become something that mentors and mentees have had to do this year in particular because of the pandemic. So they're meeting on video and conference call. So it is possible to do your mentorship virtually, but there's a couple things to consider there. Your mentor does have to directly observe you, as I mentioned in the presentation, so that it could be that your mentor is logging into a virtual session and watching you conduct a session, or they might be reviewing recorded sessions. Of course, you have to have patient consent for those things, but that could be a way of the observation occurring virtually. Your mentor also has to review your patient records, like I mentioned. So if it's going to happen virtually, then you have to talk to your employer maybe about how this is going to happen. You have to think about the security and confidentiality of the patient records and that information, and make sure that however your mentor is going to review that information, that's going to happen in a secure and confidential manner. The MSAT is a secure platform, so if you're uploading patient files and documents into the MSAT, that would be okay. To make it even more secure, you could remove or redact some of the sensitive patient information before you upload it. That would also make it more secure. But it's good to talk through these things with your mentor and your employer. If you're going to have a virtual mentorship, it is possible. But talk through these things so that you understand how they're going to happen and you work out all the details.
Thanks, Samita. My next question is, the presentation has mentioned that if we fail the CETP exam, we will have to stop working within 30 days. However, the regulation subsection 10.2 states the registrar may extend the term of an initial certificate of registration for an additional period of no more than 18 months, if any of the following circumstances exist. The member has not successfully written the registration exam referred to in paragraph 3 of subsection 5.1 by the end of the 6 months. Can you please answer this question?
Sure. Okay, so I guess this question actually goes with the section of the regulation 8.2, which talks about how the registrar may issue an initial certificate of registration if any of the following circumstances exist. So this issuing the initial certificate, if somebody does not hasn't already passed the examination, is basically at the registrar's discretion. And within that, it says the applicant who has not successfully written the examination has to undertake to successfully write the examination during the term of the initial certificate of registration. In section 10 of the regulation, it outlines that the term of the certificate is actually 6 months. The section that you're referring to actually is another discretionary area for the registrar, in which he may extend the term of the certificate if the registrant hasn't successfully written the examination by the end of the 6-month term. So the registrar will use that discretion if, say, the exam does not occur within that 6-month period, and we need to extend it so that the exam, that registrant can have that first attempt at the exam. But in the case where somebody has failed the exam, CASLPO's counsel has kind of debated this issue, and our council is made up of professional members, academic members, as well as public members appointed by the government. And based on that discussion, it was determined that ultimately CASLPO's mandate is to protect the public. And if an initial registrant does not pass a competency exam, then CASLPO cannot continue their registration until they've demonstrated that they can meet that minimum level of competency. So that is ultimately why we're going this route, is that extensions may happen, but not past that first attempt. If you've written it and you failed it, that's not a reason for the registrar to use his discretion to extend.
Okay. I know it's 8:01. I have one quick question, and I know it was a quick answer, Colleen. I think it's important that everyone hears it. It is, what title are we allowed to use until we're registered? So I think this person's asking, like, I've sent in my stuff, I'm waiting to hear back. What can I tell employers, or what kind of title can I use?
Okay, so you can't use a title, and we don't give titles to anyone who isn't registered. So we won't give you a specific title to use, because as far as the college goes, the only titles that we have the authority to provide is audiologist and speech language pathologist, and that's it. What we can say is that whatever you do, if you start to work as, say, support personnel before you are issued registration with the college, there are appropriate titles for support personnel that you can use. Speech assistant, hearing technician, there is CDA, the communicative disorders assistant. I mean, those are unregulated professions that basically your employer can determine that you can fulfill those roles until you are registered. So that's fine, but you have to strictly avoid anything related to the protected titles of audiologist, speech language pathologist, speech therapist, or any abbreviation or variation of those titles.
Thank you so much, Colleen.
Okay, well, Smita, could you advance the slide to our last one?
Yes.
And so I'd like to thank everyone for participating in this webinar. As Jessica mentioned, because we could not get to all of the questions, we will definitely be, answering questions in our FAQs, and we will notify all the webinar participants when those FAQs are available and posted on our website. We just want to let people know about our social media connections. So if you'd like to, you can join us on Facebook. We also have a YouTube channel with various videos made by CASLPO. And also, if you have, sorry that I forgot to update this slide, but the mentorship, you can contact Smita or Jessica through mentorship@caslpo.com if you have a mentorship question. And we have a contact for Canadian graduates at caslpo.com, or Canadian grad. Sorry, it's Canadian_grad at caslpo.com that you can use if you'd like to ask questions about registration. Okay, so thank you so much for coming, and bye.